Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. I'm excited to have Jackie French joining me once again. It's exciting to have you back again.
Lovely to be back. Thank you.
I was just saying to you before that I think last time we spoke there were thunderstorms and you lost power, and so hopefully we don't have that happen again.
No thunderstorms predicted. Very loud frogs, but that's all.
So
And possibly we were a wallaby bounding past, but
scratching on the door or something.
yeah, exactly. Yes.
So I'm sure Jackie doesn't need too much introduction, but for people who don't know Jackie, she's a historian, my words are all mixing up now. Ecologist and part-time honorary wombat. She writes books for kids and adults in several genres, but will probably never live down having written Diary of a Wombat. Which, yeah, I've read Diary of a Wombat to my grandson and totally loved it. Um, and you do have a bit of a inkling towards wombats. Can you tell us a little, maybe start off by telling us a little bit about that?
I knew absolutely nothing about wombats when I came here 50 years ago, but then neither did anyone else, except a 14-year-old boy called PJ Nicholson, who had
Yeah.
spent most of his timber top year climbing down wombat burrows. When a friend and I put together a wombat skeleton and rang the Australian Museum, have we done it properly? They
Oh,
got terribly
really?
excited and said, oh, we don't have one. But a wombat decided I should be his friend. And I was obviously very ignorant about the things that wombats needed to know. So for several years, every night he'd show me around the bush and he'd sit on the doorstep when I played the violin, and he was a friend. But it was a friendship of his making, not mine. I've lived with many wombats since. Some of them have been ones injured, looked after by people and released here as a soft release. Others, like Wild Whiskers, have just decided they will live in the burrow underneath the bedroom, and our relationship will be on their terms. Thank you very much. But yes, there are always wombats about.
Yeah.
And we know there's a new wombat about if suddenly the house is surrounded by wombat droppings. That's Wild Whiskers saying, this house and its inhabitants and carrots are mine. Go away.
And I have to admit, I was a bit late getting onto reading your books, but since I started reading them, I can't stop, but I've got a few to catch up. But I have recently just read The Sea Captain's Wife, and I think that's
Yes.
your, am I right saying that's your latest in your historical fiction for adults?
Yes, it is until next March, when the next one will come out. And it's actually a very special book for me. When I was 13, we had to study Golding's magnificent Lord of the Flies, about how stranded kids, boys on an island, reverted to savagery. And I got very indignant. I thought that if Australian kids were stranded on an island, we would actually do much better. So I wrote a trilogy about kids stranded on a barrier reef island. In the first book, they learn to survive, but then they're discovered. In the second book, they decide they'll cut themselves off from mainland society and build a perfect society. In book 3, which is told from the point of view of the heroine, she believes they've achieved a society of everyone being nice and good, etc., but only at the cost of being constantly monitored. So unknown to the hero, who of course she adores, he has poisoned his dinner when he comes to dine at her place. And as he explains to her that for the last 10 years, no monitoring has worked, everyone has cast off the conditioning of their early years. Everyone has learnt that humanity's great survival strategy is actually being kind to each other. It's cooperating. Anyway, it's all very melodramatic. He dies in her arms, and everyone else lives happily ever after. So this is the book I wrote as an adult about an island of cast-offs where they discover that the best way to survive is being kind to each
Yeah.
other.
Mm.
It's not a utopia.
Mm.
I had to keep on telling the editors when they said, "Oh, but these are nice women. They wouldn't push a sailor off the cliff because he raped someone." I said, yes, they would. This is not a utopia. These people are survivalists, but they have learned that being kind, cooperative, generous, etc., is the best way to survive in a very uncertain environment.
Yeah.
And as we head into a very uncertain environment, I hope that humanity remembers that we survived the last ice age, various plagues and other things, because we can talk, we can cooperate, and if we don't know each other's language, we can smile, meet each other's eyes, and hold our hands up to say, yes, I come unarmed. And if we cooperate, we might escape the volcano over there or the flood. So yes,
Yeah. And
it's a really adventurous story and a very romantic story,
yeah.
but it is about that too.
And I loved, is it Mia McRae?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Um,
What a great
yes.
character she was.
Oh, yes. I think one of my favorites though is both of her grandmothers, one on
Mm.
the island, and
Mm.
yes, and the Council of Oldies, which more or less acts as a government, but it's a combination of knitting circle, um, gossip centre, and government, and it's open to whoever can be bothered to actually come along and decide things,
Mm.
which is the advantage of being in a small community. You can, well, it's not democracy. It's basically being governed by whoever's got an opinion and can be bothered, which
Yeah. Yeah.
seems a very good criteria.
Yeah. And I was very excited. I just before I started talking to you, I opened up my mail for that I received today and found this book.
Aha, yes. Um, that is what you might call a rollicking adventure story for anyone from actually 8 upwards. I
Yeah.
accidentally opened the manual for it 2 days ago when looking for something else and started to read it again, and I was enjoying it too much to stop. So
Mm.
it's a good one.
Yeah. And how many books are you're doing, like, is it 3 books at a time, like a year that you're having published, or
I think most years it's about 5 or 6.
5 or 6? How are you
Um,
doing that?
well, they're very different genres.
Yeah,
Um,
they
there's
are.
only there's only one big book.
Yeah.
Then there's usually 2 books
But even
about
this
this
one's
size.
reasonably big. The children's one's still big.
I'm really trying to write shorter books.
Yeah.
Um, I've promised myself for the last 8 books that I would write a shorter book, but they just grow, particularly in the second, third, and fifth draft.
Mm.
They just get longer. But with the next ones, I'm really trying, and yeah, I'm trying.
Do you do just one at a time, or are you doing more than one at the same time?
No, only one at a time.
Only
I think
one,
my
yeah.
brain would explode if I tried to
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
Well, given I live in this universe, and then there's the universe of the book, I think 3 universes is too much
Mm.
for anyone's brain.
Mm.
So no, one book at a time, and it's always the adult book, the large one at this time of the year, because December, January, apart from playing soccer with a crutch with the grandkids. By the
Okay.
way, a crutch is a wonderful aid if you are playing soccer. 3 legs are much better, and also for cricket too. So look, apart from doing that and clapping as they go down the water slide, it means pretty much an email free, publishing free 6 weeks or 2 months. And
Yeah.
it's a good time to just get my teeth into a really big book.
And you said a little bit about your next big book. Is it coming out in March? Did you say?
It'll come out at the end of end of March next year. So we've just done the final corrections.
Mm.
The cover's there. We've got readers' copies have gone out. That's exciting. And to my extreme surprise, my husband is halfway through reading it.
Oh,
And it's the first in 37 years of marriage, it is the first book of mine he's ever actually picked up, looked at, started to read, and kept on reading.
Oh, really?
Yes, so hopefully that's a good sign.
Has he given you any feedback yet?
No, he's just kept on reading, but
So
he
that's
prefers
good
books with
feedback
maps
that he's
and
kept.
and
Yeah.
diagrams, and no characters. You know, well, unless you count submarines or the hardware.
Mm,
But human characters really don't say very much, and they certainly don't have thoughtful conversations.
mm.
They do things, and they put diagrams about whatever machinery they're working with.
And
He's not
anything
a
you can
fiction
tell
reader.
us about your next book?
Ah, yes, it's a book, again, one I've wanted to write since I was about 10.
Mm,
Um, it's about a woman called Penthi from the grasslands, who is an Amazon, which archaeology has recently told us the Amazons did exist. These horsewomen with spears and bows and labrys, in their bright red silk dresses and many, many tattoos of the battles or the animals that they had fought, etc. They did exist, and often they were buried with their horses. And there is a reference in the stories about the Trojan War to the hero Achilles fighting the Amazon leader Penthesilea. And they've made a bargain. If she wins, then the Greeks will sail away from Troy.
mm,
If he wins, it's a battle to the death. If he wins, then the Amazons will not fight on the side of Troy and they will leave. But according to those sources, he kills her after a long battle. But as she lies dying in his arms during the battle, they actually fall in love with each other. They recognize that both of them are willing to give their lives for their people.
mm,
Um, it's it's actually one of the most beautiful pieces, I think, of the Trojan War.
mm.
But my book, she doesn't die.
Okay.
There is a
Mm,
um, and I won't give away the twist. I will just say that the Trojan War is only a third of the way into the book,
oh,
and
okay.
the hero, not the person you think is going to be the hero.
Oh, really?
Um,
No,
it is not Achilles.
I'll be looking
Yeah.
out for that one. That sounds really exciting. And
Well, it's
you've written about a lot of different historical times, and that is there. If you could go back in time, is there an event or a certain era in time that you'd like to go back to?
110,000 years ago, exactly here. Though preferably with quite a lot of modern equipment and maybe a dentist and a surgeon and a few, and and a
Mm.
library and a coffee shop and a supply of chocolate. But I would love to see this valley before humans came
Mm,
here.
mm,
I'd love to see the megafauna. I would love to see the valley when it was a much shallower valley
mm,
and a different climate. Um, I've lived here for 50 years and I've walked the boundaries and the valleys and the hills. And I would, and I've read accounts of what it's been like in the last 10,000, or heard oral histories of what it was like 10,000 years ago or 20,000 years ago. But 110,000
yeah,
years ago,
yeah,
I would just love to see.
yeah. That would be pretty amazing.
Mm, mm.
And we've got quite a few people watching, so just wanted to say to those watching, if you've got any questions for Jackie, please type them in comments and I can read them out. I've got a question from Sina. She wonders what
Mhm.
genre you like writing the most.
Everything.
Is there any
I,
that you
I find it.
is there any you haven't
I,
written that you want to write?
I've never written an American Western. Um, Look, I think I always find it odd that everyone doesn't write in every genre.
Mm,
Most of us read many different
mm,
genres. Most of us, I mean, it's like eating different sorts of food. I love chocolate, I love cherries, I love
mm.
watermelon, but I'd hate to be on the diet of that. And just as I love browsing the books I read, I love writing very, very, very different ones.
Mm. Mm. And I can see you've got a few books behind you, and Liz is wondering what you're reading at the moment.
Ah, I'm not. I've actually just finished a book, but there's a new Connie Willis book out, which I have just downloaded, The Road to Roswell. So tonight I will be starting that. And Connie Willis, by the way, for anyone who has not read her books, read it or read the short story, Even the Queen, which I think is probably the most brilliant short story ever, ever, ever written. It's about the one thing that binds every woman of every generation and every background, and it is totally and completely hilarious. And it is how your kids or your daughters will always blame you for everything from generation to generation. But you'll love it, and it's perfect for this time of the year.
I'll have to have a look. Connie Withers, did you say?
Connie Willis, Willis. But start with her short stories because her short stories are heartbreaking and wonderful and extraordinary, and exactly what you need just to dip into for a short story. I was going to say open your horizons, but as she said, she writes science fiction,
Mm,
but she says she gets all and historical books, but she says she gets all the inspiration she needs um, just from the life around her, attending school meetings and things like that.
yeah. No,
Extraordinary insight and breadth.
I'll have to
Um,
look up
for
her books.
oh yes,
Mm.
she's wonderful.
Mm. And can you talk us through a bit about how you became to be such a prolific writer and how you got that first book published?
Okay. My first book was when I was 6. I was very, very bored on a Sunday afternoon. So I wrote one, showed it to my teacher, who gave it to the headmistress, who had a copy radioed off for all the kids in the school, and I got hooked. I realized that when you write a story, it can be exactly the book you feel like reading. Though do remember it's for an audience and they have to have a reason to turn every page. And so I just kept on writing. As I said, at 13, I was writing a trilogy. But I mostly wrote in secret. Everyone told me that,
Mm,
no, no, dear, you're wasting your time being a
mm,
writer, do something useful. No one can make a living being a writer in Australia. And luckily, they were wrong because nearly 30 years later, or 25 years later, I was suddenly a single parent with a baby in the bush, living in a shed. I needed to register my car, and it was $144, and I had
mm,
$7.30 to my name. And a friend who was a freelance journalist said, look, I'd confessed I wrote in secret. Send some stuff away, see what
yeah.
happens. So an article about the bush and kids to the Canberra Times, 3 articles to different magazines about various aspects of farming and pest management, and a book called Rainstones to Angus and Robertson, who are part of HarperCollins. But I was using a very old typewriter I found at the dump. The wombat would leave his droppings on it, so the letter E was soft and squishy. I was using very silverfish nibbled yellowed paper because the shed was somewhat damp. And I'm dyslexic, so my spelling was what you might
Mm,
call original. There was no spell
mm,
checker back then. So it was picked out of the pile by an editor who could not believe her eyes at this mess with all of the E's written in biro and just about every third word misspelled. And she thought it would be unintentionally hilarious. So she took it out to the office to read a bit aloud to everyone so they could have a giggle at Australia's worst writer. And she read the first paragraph and she read the second paragraph. And then there in the office for the rest of the afternoon, she read the entire book.
mm,
Then she came in and rang me up and offered me $200, which was worth a lot of money then,
mm,
um, to as an advance on that book. And the book was shortlisted for New South Wales Premier's Award, the CBCA Book of the Year. And suddenly I was making a living as a writer. Everyone had been wrong. You can make a living as a writer. And Angus and Robin said very rashly, oh, we would love to publish anything you write, but I don't think they really expected to get 3 or 4 books in the next 6 months, because I
Yeah.
had a whole drawer full of
Yeah.
things I'd been writing for the last 10 or 15 years.
Yeah. What an
I was going to say my spelling has improved. It hasn't, but now we've got spell checker, so it looks better.
yeah, what an amazing story that is.
Well, if it wasn't for a woman's
Mm,
assistance, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. I probably would still believe that there was no way I'd ever get published.
yeah. And I'm sure you must do a lot of research for your books. Um, can you tell us a bit about
No,
that? You don't?
no. My feeling is, if I don't already know enough, then I don't know what I don't know.
Mm,
Um, Instead, like a lot of writers, I just get absolutely obsessed by something.
mm,
Oh, look, it was like for Secret Sparrow. There was just a question in British Parliament: why don't the women who served on the front line in World War I get the same pensions as men?
yeah.
Just that one question.
Mm,
And the answer was because they never took the oath, which was a complete lie. At the end of World War I, the very embarrassed British government burnt 3,600 records. It was top secret. No one, you would be in prison for 20 years if anyone mentioned that at the Battle of Cambrai and a few other times, for lack of signallers, women worked side by side in the trenches with men. Often there would only be one female signaller who knew Morse there, but it was covered up. And it took me about 20 years of being absolutely, completely obsessed, following this one line.
mm,
There's also another advertisement in a newspaper in World War I for women who were good long distance riders, excellent at jumping over fences, and could speak French. And could
okay.
they please send a letter about themselves to an address? And obviously they were being recruited for something very different from the heroine in
Mm,
Secret Sparrow. But again, I'm I'm very slowly working my way through references to try and find out what's behind that just single mysterious line.
yeah. So do you
In the
have a big
sequel to
list of ones for ideas for future books?
Oh yeah, well, the one that will come after this, the Whisperers War. A lot of people know about Project Willie, the Willie, I should say. Hitler tried to get the Duke of Windsor to actually come back to England and as king and have a peace treaty with Hitler, and it would be a peace treaty.
Mm,
England and Germany would be allies. And as far as the public knows, the Duke of Windsor um, didn't do it, and it was dropped. But correspondence has come to light. A letter before the Blitz, it was the Duke of Windsor who suggested to Hitler um, that they should actually have the Blitz to actually soften people up so they would welcome him back as king. There was a plan that he would leave the Bahamas on a Swedish friend's yacht, would be picked up by a German submarine, taken to Britain, where sympathisers would take him to a secret location where the BBC thought they were going to cover something else entirely. And he would give a live broadcast urging everyone. This was in 1940, when after
mm,
Dunkirk, it just seemed impossible that Britain could win. He would give a live broadcast saying, we must have a treaty with Germany, an alliance, the rationing will end, the bombing will end, life will go back to normal. The Germans are our friends and want to be our friends. And he would be made king again. So the core of the book is about that plot.
mm,
It didn't stop, and
mm,
the Duke of a lot of people died to get the letters that incriminated him. But unfortunately, there were copies in the East German archives, and when the Berlin Wall came down, researchers like myself had access to an enormous amount of material which
Mm.
had been classified as top secret or
Oh, okay.
destroyed.
Yeah, wow.
But skeletons have a way of
Mm.
opening their cupboard doors and coming out, even
Mm.
if it's 100 years after they were put there.
Mm. No, yeah, that's very interesting. And the more you write, like I don't know how many books you've written, um, far
Neither
too.
do I.
But the more you write, do you find things get easier, or do you find things actually get harder because you want to get better, like do better than the ones before?
I'm not sure how to answer that.
Mm.
I think it's the same amount of work. From the time I was 6 onwards, I would
Mm.
be completely and utterly absorbed in the story. I think my technique has improved with experience. I'm very lucky to be in a profession where often authors' greatest books are written in their 70s and their
Yeah.
80s.
Mm.
Writers do tend to mature with age, like
Mm.
cheeses and wine. So I'm very lucky with that. Um, so I think my books become more ambitious as I get older.
Mm.
But no, it's the same amount of work. Before a surgery, because most pain meds don't work for me, I worked with a hypnotherapist to think, oh, well, maybe that will work as a
Oh,
pain
okay.
med.
Yeah.
And she finally just laughed and said, look, you go deeper into self hypnosis when you write than there is
Yeah.
anywhere I can take you. Just right. And after that surgery, I did. It was the sacred series called The Sacred Lamingtons of Sister Teresa. But I don't think the world is ready for a comedy about two sisters of St. Joseph in the 1920s. Look, it's also an incredibly loving tribute to the Sisters of St. Joseph. Mary
Mm.
MacKillop is one of the women I admire more than anything else. So it's definitely a work of great love and devotion for them, but it is also a comedy. And actually, the more I think about it, the more I think maybe I should actually write it again from that draft I did the day after surgery as
Yeah.
pain relief. It was enough for me to remove the pain. I think, yeah, I think it's probably time for Sister Teresa and her Lamingtons
Sounds
to
like it.
reappear.
Yeah. Sounds like we need to read about that.
Yes.
And I'm sure you get lots of readers contacting you, telling you how much they've enjoyed your books. Is there anything that you might be able to share with us from a reader that maybe touched you or surprised you or was very funny or
Oh, look, every day. The last one I just read was from someone who's actually called her daughter Matilda
oh,
after the
okay.
Matilda in
Yeah.
Matilda song. Um, a 14-year-old boy from school from intellectually handicapped kids. It was the first book he'd ever read, the first letter he'd ever read. And it was just this school thing saying, Dear Jackie French, what I have learned from your book is to be very wary of anyone who makes you angry. And I hadn't realized that was in Hitler's daughter.
Oh.
And I suddenly realized that that kid has got it. That's how wars begin.
Mm.
That's how terrorism and violence begins.
Mm.
If you can make people angry, you've got power over them. They're under
Mm.
your control. So if anyone tries to make you angry, be very, very, very
Mm.
wary.
Yeah.
And about 20 other anecdotes like that from readers.
Mm. No, that must be, yeah, must be a great feeling to be receiving all those.
Look, it's lovely. I think some of the most touching are from teenagers thanking me for books they read 3 or 4 years ago and saying,
Mm.
"Look, I was going through a really bad time, and those books really helped, and I just got to say thank you."
Mm.
And being a writer is one of the most solitary professions in the world. You send a book out there, but you've no idea if people like them or what they feel when they read them or what they see in those books. And so to hear back again is the most extraordinary joy. Um, of just joining the readers through those books. It's one of the best parts of being a writer.
Yeah, probably one of the few professions where you can touch so many different people in so many different ways as well.
I think so. I think my most surprising was from the owner of a cattle property who had followed Matilda's advice. They used the signs that she had been taught by Auntie Nov to know when there was going to be a drought and when there was going to be a rain.
Mm,
So she sells nearly all the stock. And then 6 months before she knows it is going to rain, the trees and the animals have told her. She buys up stock, she buys land from people walking off the property, and that's actually how she becomes wealthy. She
mm,
knows when there'll be drought, she'll know when there's going to be rain. And the letter was from a farmer, and they had done exactly that in the last drought. They'd used exactly those signs and said there's going to be a drought. They'd used exactly those signs and thought it's going to rain again in 6 weeks. And I just thought, thank goodness, you were actually betting your entire farm on the fact that I was correct
yeah.
in a loss primitive. And I'm now absolutely terrified, and I'm really, really glad it worked. And you didn't
Yeah.
lose the farm, and that instead your mortgage is paid off. The kids are at boarding school, and everything is good because you followed Matilda's advice.
Yeah.
Um, so that was a slightly terrifying one, but at least she wrote to me afterwards, not halfway through, saying, "Oh, look, I hope Matilda's right
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we bet the farm on it."
Yeah. No, that's pretty amazing. Well, thanks so much for chatting with me. As usual, I love chatting to you and love reading your books and look forward to reading more and more of them. Um, so, yeah, thanks so much. And thanks for the people who joined in and asked some questions.
Lovely. Look, thank you very, very much. It's always great fun talking to you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye.